Okay, I want to thank Senators Murray, Stabenow, and Bennet for joining me today. So we had a lot to discuss at lunch today, both looking ahead and also taking a moment to look at what we've accomplished this far in Congress. From lowering costs, rebuilding local economies, funding our government, supporting our allies in their fights for democracy, Democrats have shown up, ignored the conservative chaos, and led the way. Now, we're following a busy and successful session. Senate Democrats have led the way in passing the foreign aid package, getting desperately needed funds for our allies across the globe, passing FISA, the reauthorization, and ensuring a vital piece of our national security is protected. So to date, it's clear that Senate Democrats have delivered. Don't take my word for it. Look at the numbers. $866 billion in private investment announced under this administration and under the Senate Democratic majority. Last week, I stood with the President to announce a $125 billion investment in New York and Idaho by Micron, made possible by our CHIPS science law, which we're so proud of. More than $500 billion in direct investments in our infrastructure, in clean energy products, and more. The legislation we passed is creating historic investments in our communities, real good-paying jobs. We're bringing back manufacturing to America, something that people thought couldn't be done. It's fixing our supply chains to lower costs. It's creating jobs in every corner of the country to expand the middle class. And now we're working with our Republican colleagues to get FAA done. Both parties have an incentive to work together to get FAA done as quickly and smoothly as we can, to keep our skies safe, to keep our federal employees well taken care of. And today, I joined Senators Booker and Wyden to introduce the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act, a comprehensive and necessary update to the federal government's approach to cannabis. I'm proud to be the first majority leader ever to call for an end to marijuana prohibition. I've seen consequences of the outdated laws and the benefits of common sense cannabis regulation at the state level. Well, it's time for the Congress to follow suit. The states have been the laboratories, and they've shown the success of doing what we're doing. So I'm very proud of the bill we're releasing today. Our legislation will finally remove marijuana from the list of controlled substances. And also today, our dear colleague Senator Stabenow introduced the substance of our Farm Bill. It's vital for the country and rural America. It does a great job at helping rural America. It does a great job at feeding those who need food. And we're going to work doggedly to get it done with all due speed. Senator Murray.
Well, getting our annual funding bills passed and signed into law was not easy. Between that and the supplemental we just passed, we went through endless antics from House Republicans, replacing their own speaker, renegotiating their own spending cap agreement, demanding the inclusion of hundreds of poison pills that were always going to be a non-starter, and rejecting border policies that they demanded in the first place. This political theater created unnecessary delays and came with a cost, with House Republicans threatening the full faith and credit of our country and our global leadership, bringing us to the brink of a shutdown several times over and leaving our allies at war and civilians in need waiting for aid. And at one point, House Republicans proposed cuts that were steep and reckless enough to do real harm to families and communities. It's easy to see the cuts House Republicans wanted as numbers on a spreadsheet. Tens of billions of dollars here, tens of billions of dollars there. But this is not a spreadsheet to our families. It's childcare. It's the bridge that they cross every day. It's whether they can put food on the table or whether that food is safe. As I've said before, we saw repeatedly that when House Republicans listened to the loudest voices on the furthest right, the ones who clearly don't want to govern, they got nowhere. What a contrast to Democrats, who in the Senate and House provided the majority of yes votes to responsibly fund the government and support our allies. In the Senate, we worked together from the start, And while we didn't end up with bills either side would have written on their own, we passed the strongest bipartisan funding bills to actually help people and solve problems. I and so many others worked with Republicans to build bipartisan support for all 12 appropriation bills that we marked up. And we wrote a security supplemental bill with Republicans that passed the Senate months ago by a large bipartisan margin, only to then wait weeks for it to come back so we could have passed essentially the very same bill with some cosmetic changes. But let's talk about what Democrats did get done in that. Democrats fought to send a $1 billion increase in child care and pre-K to President Biden's desk. That makes a concrete difference for families. House Republicans wanted to slash WIC and force states to pick and choose which moms and which babies would get fed. Democrats fully funded WIC. Democrats protected the historic investments we've made alongside President Biden in climate action. And it was Democrats who protected investments in everything from education to health care to housing. And all the while, House Republicans tried every way they could to ban abortion and rip away women's reproductive freedom in government funding bills. But I said from the start there would be no extreme far-right riders to restrict women's reproductive freedoms, and there were not. Now, as we look to fiscal year 2025, I want everyone to really hear me. For me, the word of the day, today and every day until we pass our funding bills, is going to be parity. By that, I mean when my Republican colleagues insist that despite the Fiscal Responsibility Act, we need to boost spending in national security, I will also insist the boost to defense spending be matched with a similar increase for investments here at home. We do need stronger investments in our military and national security to address the challenges that we face today. But investing in child care, in health care, in education, our environment, in workers, in critical research, and all the other priorities here at home matters just as much as the investments we make in our military. Both are critically important, and I have faith that the Senate Appropriations Committee will again do its job and fund the nation's need on a strong bipartisan basis. I plan to once again mark up bills. This year will be tough from a resource perspective, and we need bipartisan cooperation for agreements to get it done and pass our bills. That's my message for the fiscal year. Thank you.
Senator Stabenow.
Well, good afternoon. You know, over and over again, we stand at the podium and talk about being laser focused on growing the middle class as Democrats and bringing down costs. That's what we have been doing. That's what we are doing. We're seeing results of that for people, more to be done. But that's where we're focused, growing the middle class and bringing down costs. And there is no question about it that when you look at the top of the list of what we've been able to get done in this area, it's around prescription drugs. It was no easy task. Everybody's talked about bringing down prescription drug costs and negotiating Medicare for years and years and years. We took on Big Pharma, and we won. And not one Republican in the House or the Senate joined us. Not one. When they were in charge, what did they do for pharma? 40% tax cut. When we're in charge, it's about lowering the cost for people. And when you look at it now and you talk to people, every crowd I go to, I ask people to raise their hand, do you know someone or have you had your insulin cap $35 a month? People raise their hand. We now have 3 out of 4 asthma inhalers that are being capped at $35 a month. Shingles and pneumonia and other vaccines are free for seniors. This year, a senior's out-of-pocket drug cost for the whole year is capped at $3,500. I met a woman the other day who's already met the cap and will not have to put more dollars out of pocket. And next year, that cap goes to $2,000 and will continue there. And we know that lowering prices involves negotiating, and Medicare is negotiating the top 10 most commonly used drugs right now, which is going to make a huge difference for people because we, as we know, have been paying the highest prices in the world. And that, under President Biden and Democrats' leadership, is changing. We're cracking down on costs in so many ways, and I want to mention just for a moment rural America, where we have been focused on high-speed internet, which is so critical for our rural hospitals and schools and families and farmers and small businesses, focusing on supporting family farms and good-paying jobs. And today I'm very proud to be announcing with our Democratic colleagues on the committee, with the full support of Senator Schumer and our whole caucus, the Rural Prosperity and Food Security Act, which is going to lower costs for farmers and for families. We are laser focused on keeping farmers farming, keeping families fed, and keeping rural communities strong. And that's what this does. And even though we are starting with a bill that is put forward by Democrats, we are reaching out. I am reaching out to our Republican leaders on the other side to say this is the moment to complete the negotiations, because farmers and families need the certainty of a 5-year farm bill. And just to make it clear we're serious about something that can pass, we have over 100 bipartisan bills in our farm bill, over 100 bipartisan bills. Because whether it's lowering the cost of prescription drugs, lowering the cost of food for your family, household bills, or high-speed internet, we are working every day for people, whether you live in a big city or a small town.
Senator Bennet.
Thank you. Thanks, Chuck.
Colorado.
Thank you. Great to be here with my colleagues to say a word about Ukraine. The Japanese Prime Minister came and addressed Congress within the last 2 weeks, and he mentioned Ukraine 4 times in that speech, at least 4 times in that speech, because he knew what the stakes for the world would be if we failed to fund the Ukrainian people in their battle against Putin, what it would mean in the living in the shadow of Xi Jinping, as so many other of our allies do as well. There were isolationists in the United States Senate and in the House of Representatives that we have seen before in American history, who did everything they could to try to scuttle America's responsibility to the world, America's responsibility to our allies. There were moments in the last 6 months when that legislation was dead, when we were going to lose. And Vladimir Putin, I think, understood very well that he was counting on winning on a battleground that was defined by the political dysfunction of the United States Congress. And what we saw instead was the Congress rise to that challenge. The Senate passed this vote with 68 votes here first. Is that right? Yeah. 68 votes here, 22 Republicans. Sent it over to the House, where 72, where we worked to get it past the House of Representatives and then brought it back over here. I want to thank Leader Schumer for his extraordinary efforts. This bill was dead, and he kept it alive, and Mitch McConnell also never lost sight of America's role, America's responsibility here. So by the time he came back to the Senate, not only did we pass, but it passed with 80 votes in the United States Senate, a profound rejection of the isolationist wing of the Republican Party, and I think a very important reassertion of America's leadership in the world, but also evidence that the United States Senate can work to solve hard problems. And I want to thank Leader Schumer for his leadership in making sure that could happen.
Would you like to repeat that last statement?
Just in case I never say it again, let me know. I'm just kidding.
Leader Schumer, do you think that President Biden should be more vocal talking about how to combat the violence that's taking place at universities?
I have made my views clear in a statement that I gave on the floor yesterday about violence at Columbia and on campuses. There's no place for violence or anti-Semitism on the campuses. Yes. Go ahead. We're working very hard to get it done. It's complicated. As you know, there's opposition from some people on it, but I am very eager to get it done. It's a high priority. Yes.
Would you put the House anti-Semitism bill to a vote before it passes?
Well, we haven't seen what the House is sending us yet. Yes.
There's a lot of calls on the Republican side about trying to defund or cut some of the funding to some of these universities under Title VI because of what they see as potential violations with Jewish students. Would Democrats, and would you specifically, be in favor of looking at some of that?
Again, I've made my views clear on my floor statement, and you
But
can
that
go
can really
back
cut into
and
the
you can
funding
go
for
back
some
and
of
look at my anti-Semitism speech on the floor that I gave months ago. Yes.
Is there any chance of adding the marijuana banking or stablecoin bill to the FAA?
Look, there are lots of people who have different amendments not relevant to the FAA that want to get them on. I'm one of those, but we have to get this done in a bipartisan way, and we'll figure out the best way to get it done. Yes. Say it again.
Given the short time frame to the end of the fiscal year, is it really realistic to do a whole new round of appropriations, and would you accept a CR?
Look, I have great faith in Patty Murray and our Appropriations Committee, and they're going to do work very hard. No one thought they could get it done last time, and look at the great job they did. Last question.
Do you support including these new slots of DCA in the FAA?
As I said, lots of people have different views and different amendments they want into FAA. We're going to try to work in a bipartisan way to get it done. Thank you, everybody.